I'm Mick Garris, and this is Post-Mortem. And under dissection, John Carpenter, who changed the course of modern horror films in 1978 with Halloween. Where did your love of films and filmmaking begin?
In movie theaters when I was a little kid. My mom was a big movie fanatic and took me to everything. And the little town I grew up in, there were 2 downtown theaters and there were 2 drive-ins. And I just went all the time. That's where I fell in love with cinema.
And this was in Kentucky?
That's right. Small town in Kentucky, Bowling Green. My big love was Westerns, first of all, but science fiction and horror movies. The 50s is a golden age for science fiction movies and monster movies, which I loved dearly.
And did you want to make them when you were a kid?
I wasn't sure what was going on with movies at first until I kept seeing this one name over and over again on films that I kind of recognized, and that was Roger Corman. I said, well, what is this director business? What does he do? And I finally found out. I didn't know then. I was very young.
Now, you are literally a student of film in that you were a film school student at USC at a time that really has never been replicated. What was that experience like?
I first learned about USC Film School and UCLA, the idea of it, when I was in college and I was adrift. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. My girlfriend had left me, and I was kind of bereft and sad. There was nothing happening in Bowling Green, and there was nothing going to happen there. I was going to either become a teacher like my dad. My dad was a music teacher. I suppose I would have followed along in English or something like that. The only thing I really had that I loved was this rock and roll band I played in. And I was reading this Time magazine about film school, about these geniuses that are coming out of film school at the time. George Lucas was one of them, John Milius, and a couple others. And I just remembered thinking, you know what, that's really interesting. Maybe I could learn how to make movies. Because that was my essential love. So I applied to USC and UCLA. My dad was kind enough to give me money, and off I went. 1968.
Wow. You went in there, you didn't know anything about the construction of movies, the physical construction, or did you know a little about it before you got in?
I had made amateur movies with my dad's camera. I sort of knew about cutting, sort of. But I had no idea. And it was one of the great experiences of my life. I was really lucky to be in that place at that time. Because USC made you do everything. They made you write it, they made you shoot it, they made you cut it, edit it, direct it, act in it, work the sound, laboratory, animation, projection, all of it.
But there's nothing like storytelling. You can not have a command of the language and still make a good film if you have a good script, a good cameraman. What do you feel that you learned in that gave you the style?
Style is all about instinct. It's all about how a director sees things. If you watch any of the directors that you admire, or I admire, anyone admires, and you watch their work, you can see what their concerns are and how they approach things, and how they approach the characters, how they approach the world they're in. So it's instinctual type thing. A director makes movies about himself all the time, in some way or another. So, but it's finding a way to express, in visual terms, the instincts that you have, the feelings that you have inside. And I had no idea how to do that. So that taught me. Plus, at the time, some of my visiting professors who came down and lectured, Orson Welles, Alfred Hitchcock, John Ford, Howard Hawks, Roman Polanski came down with his film, Rosemary's Baby.
Wow.
We had Antonioni. It was unbelievable time to listen to these guys talk about movie making and then watch their films. I can't tell you what that was like.
Now, you had a very early brush with Oscar, with The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, which you co-wrote and you edited and the like. What was that experience like?
Bronco Billy was a senior production project at USC. And you form crews, and you go out and make a film, and we all contributed to the story, and I did the editing and the music, and it was a nice little film. I mean, it wasn't any great shakes. And it wins the Academy Award for short film. The couple of days after we won, the head of the Department of Cinema came in, had the Oscar in a bag, a plain paper bag, and we got to look at it. And then he pulls it away.
Oh, really?
Oh, they were real jerks down there. Really pieces of work.
Now, the transition from film school to working in Hollywood was an interesting transition because you kind of halfway were there with Dark Star, which wasn't that a student project that became a feature film?
That's right. Dark Star was a graduate film project at USC, began that way, made 45 minutes of it. I partnered up with Dan O'Bannon, very, very talented guy. He was co-writer with me, production designer, and an actor in the film, and he was the editor. And we raised some money to shoot it as a feature, and it became a feature, and we met the legendary Jack H. Harris, who finally released it.
The man who released The Blob and
That's
was
right.
responsible
and Son of Blob. And
yeah.
I learned a lot about the movie business from Jack Harris, a lot of it. Oddly enough, my first big paying job in Hollywood came through him, from a little screenplay I wrote called Eyes, turned into The Eyes of Laura Mars. He knew John Peters because they lived near each other in Malibu. So he got him the script, and they hired me to write it, and it was very nice.
Well, the transition well, first of all, making professional films where you have a schedule you have to keep and a budget and people who have purse strings and you can't just hire your friends. What was that experience like doing it for the first time with Assault on Precinct 13?
The first time I worked with 35 millimeter and Panavision on Assault on Precinct 13, it was independently financed again, so there wasn't a big producer presence over my head. But it was stunning having to get up that early in the morning and go work. I just wasn't used to it. And it was a really grueling, grueling shoot. My longest day on that film, 24 hours in and out.
Wow.
In a real jail, and it was a nightmare. It was an eye-opener in terms of what you have to do to prepare. What do I need to do to prepare this film? That was my real big training ground there.
Oh, and it's a big action film with a lot going on, even though it's in one location for the most part.
It's a little tiny movie, Mick.
It's a little tiny movie, but
film.
there's a lot going on, and that's really tough stuff to do, especially when you've got walls being shot out and things blowing up.
Oh, yeah.
Must have been an interesting experience,
It was. It was. It was the physical hammering that you take on it that I wasn't prepared for yet.
Now, have you always been drawn to genre, whether it's Western or thriller or science fiction or horror?
Man, in the beginning, I just wanted to be a director. I didn't care. And I got in the business to make Westerns. That was my first love. About as close as I got to that was I sold a script to John Wayne's company, Batjack, and I worked over there for about a year on the Western.
Really?
But by the time JW, as they call him, read it, and he was too old and sick.
Yeah.
So.
Well, Assault on Precinct 13 was sort of a Western. It was sort of Rio Bravo. It was sort of a Howard Hawks movie.
Yeah.
Was that the intent?
Oh yeah. I became a big Howard Hawks fan in film school. He was a director that's not really well known. It really isn't well known today outside of film buffs. But I just fell in love with his work.
And of course, Hawks did The Thing originally, which was a big inspiration to you. Who were your other heroes besides Hawks?
Hitchcock, I think, for his technique, Polanski. But the same directors that everybody at the time revered as classic American directors, Orson Welles. John Ford a little bit, although I really soured on him after a bit. Irish vaudeville, I can't take it anymore. I can't take the scenes where they're dancing, and they're The Searchers is such a great movie, but it's ruined in the middle. Ruined by the return, where they're getting married and knock the firewood off my shoulder. Ay. And when I saw it as a kid, I loved The Quiet Man, but revisiting that is just makes me want to tear it up.
Really?
God, it's so sentimental, and its point of view is totally immigrant. Whereas Hawks was a completely integrated filmmaker. He was not sentimental. If anything, he was hard-ass. But Ford was sentimentalizing the West and women, especially mothers. And behind the scenes, of course, that was not like that, but that's what showed up. He made one great film that was tremendous, The Grapes of Wrath.
Oh,
it was
yeah,
just a terrific movie.
Well, the thing about Ford, though, is his pictures. I mean, the visuals, the fantastic Monument Valley shots and things were just, visually, his stuff was so breathtaking.
Some of it. Some of it.
Yeah.
But, and not that I don't make this mistake on every film, but this guy could not direct stage lines. Look at the interior of the Stagecoach. In Stagecoach, when they're all sitting around, it's a mess. You can't tell who's talking to who.
Yeah, they're looking apart from each other. And
it's bizarre.
Yeah.
But no, you're right. He sort of memorialized Monument Valley. Yeah, he was an American master, you have to say.